Hello and welcome to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Tyler. The Baltimore Orioles have been swept for the second time this season and the second time in 2 years, but we're actually going to focus in this episode on a different topic from the games themselves. It's an exciting but somewhat confusing call-up that the Baltimore Orioles have made this week, and we'll get into that in just 1 second. But first, I remind everyone listening on their various podcast apps and watching on YouTube that this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC/MMA and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. So when the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. So head to the website today, that's betonline.ag, to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus for your first deposit. That's promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Thanks again to Bet Online for sponsoring today's episode. So what is the exciting call-up, you may be asking? If you're watching on YouTube, which you can, if you're not doing that already, you can go over to youtube.com, search the Warehouse Podcast, will pop up. And if you give us a follow and a subscribe over there, I guess subscribe, you can't follow over there. You could do a like if you like what you're listening to. Head over there, get involved. We'd really appreciate it. But you can see on my screen right now that the O's are calling up their number 4 prospect, Heston Kjerstad. Now, this is not earth-shattering news. Kjerstad has been up twice before for the Orioles. He came up late in 2023. I thought did pretty well for a first-time big league player. Struck out a decent amount, but hit the ball hard, all that stuff. Seemed like he was going to make the opening day roster going into spring training, I think, back in like mid-February, late February. It seemed like he had the inside track, potentially over Colton Cowser, to make the team as a, left-handed young bat. Ultimately struggled in the Grapefruit League, didn't make it, but did get called up earlier this season, I think in late April. Stayed up for about 3 weeks, didn't play a whole lot, and the stats weren't good, but again, couldn't really get in the flow of things. I think they struggled to really find a role for him, because that was in the midst of Cowser was playing really well at the time. I think Mullins was slowing down from his early season doing well. Santander was struggling, but I think Santander always struggles early. They weren't going to take him out of the lineup. So it was kind of tough to find a spot for Kjerstad to play games. I believe Austin Hayes might have just gone on the IL when he came up originally, so maybe they were thinking he'd pick up his at-bats. But again, that's a young lefty coming up for a veteran righty. Hayes known for playing very good defense. Kjerstad, that's not so much his calling card. It wasn't exactly a like-for-like swap there. So he just really struggled to get into games. Ultimately got sent back down. Brandon Hyde said at the time that there just really wasn't the playing time for him up here. And they prioritized him getting regular playing time over him just getting exposed to, the big league experience, the big league environment. While I think the Orioles recognize that that has value, even if you're not playing it, there's value to being around the process every single day. There is more value, in their opinion, and I think most people would agree, in actually playing the game of baseball, regardless of the level, and getting your hacks in, getting better as a player. So he went back down to Norfolk, and he's been there since mid-May. So only about a month and some change down there. His numbers in Norfolk this year are quite good. He's batting .300 with a .397 on base, .601 slugging. He's hit 16 home runs, 14 doubles, 32 walks to 67 strikeouts. So I think these are all kind of in line with sort of the player we expect Heston Kjerstad to be. He's going to strike out, but he's going to hit the ball. He's going to hit the ball hard and far, give you some power in the middle of the lineup. And that's exactly what he's done. I'm looking over on FanGraphs now. His WRC plus, so weighted runs created plus, at AAA this year has been 148. So he's been 48% better than a AAA average player, which is not a 1-to-1 to major league level competition. But I think you could definitely say he is dominating the competition at AAA and has kind of cleared that bar of, is there that much more to do at the level that he couldn't be doing and learning and getting better at the big league level? And I think it's fair to say no. Kjerstad's basically gotten to the point at AAA you want a player to get to feel really confident and comfortable. in bringing them to your big league club. He's done that. And so he gets the call back up to the Baltimore Orioles. But I think what is interesting and confusing a little bit is the Orioles had just sent Kyle Stowers down a few days ago when Jordan Westburg had his hip flare up situation, had to come out of the game in New York after Juan Soto ran into him. I think they brought up Nick Maton at the time. Maton, to this point, I don't believe he's played, but he has not gotten an at bat. I don't believe hasn't played a whole lot. Really is just there as a security, an insurance policy if Westberg's hip had flared up, which to this point it hasn't. He played the next day. He came out that game, came out the game the day he got hurt, came back into the lineup the next day and has been in the lineup, I think, every day since that. So that hasn't happened. So because Stowers was sent down, he can't come back up for 10 days if the move is to DFA Maton. I should say that. We don't know what the counter move will be for Kjerstad to come up because as I'm recording this is just a report. It's on the Orioles website though, and I'm sure MLB wouldn't be having those sorts of like wild speculation on their own website. So I'm sure it's happening. But we don't know what the counter, the make weight move is going to be, who is going to go down or get DFA'd or whatever. It makes all the sense in the world that Maton would be the one to get DFA'd. I think he's a guy that doesn't have a role on this team, has not been a successful big league hitter in his career. I think you DFA him, you potentially get him through waivers and he stays in the organization. There's not really too much risk there. I'm not sure who else you would remove from the roster that would make a lot of sense right now. I think the only other person, well, this doesn't even make any sense, but I'll say it anyway, is Colton Cowser has not hit particularly well for the last 2 months. He had a really good April. I think his OPS in May and June are very similar, like a 580 OPS, which is pretty terrible. But he hits the ball hard, plays good defense, has a good arm, runs well, athleticism, all these things that are part of what make the Orioles really good right now. So I don't see Colton Cowser going down, but you know, that would make sense in terms of young lefty bat for young lefty bat. But we know that the skills are different between Kjerstad and Cowser. So anyway, I'll preface all of that to say that we don't know what the counter move is for Kjerstad. If it somehow is Cowser, which I think some people are, screaming that the sky is falling on social media right now that it is Cowser, then I guess that a lot of the things I'm going to say from here on out aren't going to make a lot of sense because I'm going to talk about playing time and where he fits and all that. And if Cowser is not on the roster, then it makes a lot more sense. But my assumption is a guy you've had on the roster for 3 months has shown to be a really good baseball player at certain times. You're not going to send that guy down in the middle of a season where you're winning at a 100 win clip. They didn't send Mullins down, and he was playing, I think, far worse than Cowser was. And Mullins had the options we've talked about on this podcast. They didn't send him down. They didn't DFA Austin Hayes, who had been struggling really bad early on. So I know Cowser is younger than the two of them, but I also think this is sort of part of the process of being a major leaguer is working through your stuff. So all that to say, don't know what the opposite move is going to be for Kjerstad to come up, but we assume it's Maton. And if it is, then the situation that Heston Kjerstad comes into now is essentially no different than it was when he came up in late April through mid-May and couldn't really get in the lineup. If anything, it's a tougher situation right now to crack the lineup than it was, at that time. If anything, it's a tougher situation right now to crack the lineup than it was a month and a half ago because Mullins is hitting the ball now. He's back to like basically being the type of hitter that he is or has been historically versus being one of the worst hitters in the league as he was in May. Austin Hayes is playing less frequently, I think, but playing really well. He has an OPS, a 1 dot OPS. Anthony Santander is now the best power hitter in baseball in June, at least. He's hit 11 home runs in the month and I think is like top 5 in home runs for the year now, all of a sudden after being pretty bad early on, but which is kind of Santander's calling card there. He tends to struggle early on. Even was it last year when he had the WBC and was really good at the WBC, and then came to Major League Baseball time and he struggled a little bit. They're both playing well. I'm sorry, all three of the veterans are playing well. Hauser is not playing well, but again, offers a skill set that Kjerstad does not. And then if you're looking at, first base DH options, Kjerstad hasn't played a lot of first base this year at AAA, but I think, at some point in his career, he will do so. Where's he going to get in there? If Ryan Mountcastle is playing like an all-star level first baseman, I made that argument on Camden Chat a couple weeks ago. And while I'm saying that, on CamdenChat.com today, you can go and read my article about this exact topic, Heston Kjerstad. I don't get into as much detail as I can now because I can speak more than 1,100 words in 25 minutes, but you get the gist if you just want to go check that out. But I made the argument on Camden Chat weeks ago that Ryan Mountcastle is the AL's best first baseman. So I think there's an argument to me that he should be starting over, Vlad Guerrero Jr. in the All-Star game here in a month or in 3 weeks. And then Ryan O'Hearn plays a little first base. That's really mostly Mountcastle's domain at this point, but O'Hearn will get in there, DH obviously a lot, and then play some right field. O'Hearn's playing great. O'Hearn's playing just as well as he did most of last year when it didn't seem fluky from the numbers necessarily, but a guy to be good all of a sudden is like a 28-year-old. That doesn't really happen very much. You expect a steep drop off, and it just hasn't come. You're not going to put Kjerstad in the lineup right now over those guys. You might in August if they're struggling, but you're not going to right now. So the situation that Kjerstad comes into is essentially identical to what it was a month ago, if not more difficult. And so it perplexes a little bit what the plan is here. So is the plan just to kind of yo-yo him and Stowers throughout the season and keep them both engaged at the big league level so that they are ready to go if and when the time comes? Is it just that they couldn't bring Stowers back up? Like, would they rather have Stowers on the roster to eat up space, which is essentially what he's done? Although I think, he's more than capable of playing some outfield. They've kind of not really used him. And because he wouldn't be eligible to come up because you can't bring somebody up 10 days within 10 days of sending them down unless there's an IL issue. Is that not why? Why did Norby not? Maybe bring Norby up. Send Maton down and bring Norby up. Norby was up. I know that was with Mateo hurt, but Norby's played some corner outfield if that's kind of what you're after is like the flexibility. And Norby's right-handed when I think the roster could use some more right-handed bats. Why not bring Norby up? Norby couldn't come back when Maton was called up because it hadn't been 10 days for him. But now it's been 10 days, so why not Norby? Why isn't he the call? So it's just some interesting stuff that is a little bit perplexing. I guess the other possibility is that Kjerstad is going to come up and play a little bit more. Potentially they're not in love with Hauser's hitting performance right now, and they want to give him some time off, but they want his glove around as essentially the backup center fielder. And, even in a game where Kjerstad starts in left field, I doubt they want him to end the game in left field. I would bet they prefer Hauser out there. So maybe it's a situation where they're going to give Kjerstad a 1 or 2 week run as like one of the regulars in the outfield. Let Hauser take a step back and relax a little bit, get his feet under him, and use him as a pinch runner, as a glove, and maybe pinch hit for a righty late in the game if it's a hard throwing right-handed closer or something. Maybe there's some possibilities there. I don't know. But it's just, if that's not what they're going to do, it's interesting to bring him up at all. Versus what you said the issue was a month ago was there's no room for him to get playing time. We'd rather him get playing time than why are you bringing him up? So is he getting playing time? Is he riding the bench? If he rides the bench, I really don't get it. If he plays, then okay, let's see what he can do a little bit. Been playing well at AAA. June has not been his best month, but his OPS is still over 800. So I still, plenty competitive down there. So yeah, I'm interested to see what the Orioles do here because the other thing that's looming right now is the trade deadline. It's not around the corner, I wouldn't say, but it's a month and some change out. It's about 5 to 6 weeks out. The Orioles, I feel safe saying, will be active. They have clear issues on the pitching staff right now that Bradish, Wells, and Means are out for the year. You need a replacement in the rotation somewhere. I think as the rotation exists now is fine to survive and make the postseason in some capacity. I think, Burns is the ace of most staffs in baseball. Rodriguez, I think, has been very good this year, apart from this last start in Houston where he just kind of fell apart late in the game. But then besides that, it's, Irvin, Suarez, Povich, maybe McDermott gets a shot here eventually, but the depth is getting thin all of a sudden. So you need an arm there. You need at least one arm. I think you need at least one very good arm to feel confident. I know I spoke on this podcast a few weeks ago about Cade Povich being one of the most important players on the Orioles for the remainder of the season, and I still believe that. The only thing is you worry about innings with a rookie pitcher. So while he may potentially be fine, and I think he showed well in New York this past week. It was a weird outing where he really wasn't getting swings and misses, but they weren't really hitting him hard either. I think Povich can be fine, but you don't feel great going into the postseason with a rookie as one of your three guys. We saw that last year with Rodriguez, kind of just fade a little bit, struggle in the play in the one postseason game. So I don't know if the Orioles want to go in with a rookie to the postseason and say, all right, kid, you're going to go through the order 2 times. I'm not sure I see that happening. Especially, Povich has been good, but he's nowhere near the pedigree that Rodriguez was. So I think you need to think about that a little bit too. So they definitely need a pitcher in the rotation. I think, a pitcher in the rotation. I think they need 2 arms in the bullpen. Now, you don't need 2 lockdown closer types. I think you could get a very good, decent middle reliever for a guy like a Kyle Stowers. If they want to bring Norby up and maybe trade Ramon Urias, although that's, again, not like for like, because Urias has got more flexibility defensively than Norby does. So I don't know if I love that, but Stowers I could see going in a deal for a middle relief pitcher. And then I think you need a really good reliever. Again, it maybe doesn't have to be a Mason Miller type because he's got some UCL stuff that I don't love, despite how fantastic everything else about him is. It doesn't have to be a Mason Miller, but they need somebody in the bullpen that's capable. Kimbrel's been very good this year, but do you trust him at the very most important times? I don't know. Cano, kind of the same deal. Cano's numbers are very good, but when the rubber meets the road, sometimes with him, I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel great about it. But again, I'm looking at the world through, Felix Bautista tinted glasses, and not many players are like that. So I'm not sure what they do. Kjerstad, clearly, if they're going to go get a really premium talent, Kjerstad to me feels like a perfect centerpiece of all that because he is the right balance of very talented. He's a top 25 prospect in baseball, according to MLB Pipeline. And he also is the right amount of blocked from opportunities in his current organization. I just don't see the fit for him to play every day in Baltimore right now. Now, what I will say about that, the caveat there is that Mike Elias never looks at the world one season at a time. He's always looking a few seasons ahead. And what we have on the horizon there is Anthony Santander being a pending free agent. He's due to hit free agency after the season. He's been great in June. Has been a great Oriole. I would love to see him make an All-Star game. If they can make that happen this year, that'd be great. I love when that. I'm eternally bummed that Nick Markakis never made an All-Star game as an Oriole. I know he made the one as a Brave late in his career. Would have loved to see him make an All-Star game as an Oriole because he deserved it. I think Santander is probably a notch below Markakis, obviously, as an Oriole, but similar vein of a very good Oriole for a very long time. Would love to see it happen. But Santander is going to be a free agent after the season. And as wonderful as he is at the plate, are the Orioles going to pay a guy that to me is looking more and more like a DH only type? I was thinking he'd get more in the mix at first base this year, but O'Hearn playing so well has kind of not made that an option. And I understand that. But if he's not going to play first base, if he's going to eat up the DH hole the whole time, there's some loss in value there when you can't have the DH spot open too often, and you're losing something there. So you got to think about that when you're paying a guy who is a 30 plus home run guy, but all he does is DH. There's a reason that there's always an argument about, you know, the value of those DH only guys. And yes, a few of them got into the Hall of Fame, but it's few and far between. There's, David Ortiz and Edgar Martinez and not a whole lot else. Your team loses something when you can't rotate guys into the DH spot. Um, so, and also with, Adley Rutschman getting a year older as a catcher, not that he's old, but you want to get him in the DH spot occasionally. You got Sam Basayo coming. You want him to catch. Like, if that's the plan, I'm thinking they're going to want Basayo and Rutschman in the lineup most days. I cannot see them signing Anthony Santander to some big long-term deal to clog up the DH spot for a long time. So again, I don't know that makes a lot of sense. But the positive of, if you want to call it a positive, of Santander potentially leaving is that it does kind of finally open up that, swath of innings in the outfield that the Orioles haven't had available for these younger guys to come up. It's, we've been speculating about a trade of Hayes, Mullins, Santander for 2 years now. Hasn't happened. And now Santander, you're not going to trade him. Obviously, the Orioles are, not going to have that happen, but he could be gone in the offseason. And if he does, that does open up innings. And who's going to play him? Well, Heston Kjerstad is like the natural heir apparent internally for that role. So if the Orioles trade him now, then they're not going to have those innings covered next year. Now they'd figure something out there. They could, Hayes will still be around. They could swing Cowser over to right, Hayes in left, Mullins in center, and that's good. But again, Mullins and Hayes a year older. Do you feel great about that? If Stowers is gone now, that depth is gone. So it's just, you're real thin all of a sudden there. And that makes me think alarm bells going off in Mike Elias's head a little bit. So I don't know. But that's kind of the lay of the land there. It's an interesting decision from the Orioles to do that when there were other options to promote a guy that they didn't take. And they instead chose to bring the rookie up, who they've already said is down because he can't find playing time for him. So if you're bringing him up now, to me, you're bringing him up because there is playing time available. It's, people talk about, they want to showcase him for other teams. To me, that makes literally no sense. You showcase him in AAA where he's hitting the ball all over the field and everything, not by bringing him up and potentially having him struggle as a rookie who hasn't gotten a ton of major league playing time. That doesn't make any sense. And you're running his service clock. That makes no sense to me. So I don't think that you're bringing him up to showcase him. That is illogical. I think if you're bringing him up a month after saying he was going to get sent down because he couldn't play, or they didn't have a room for him, you're bringing him up to play him. So how is that going to work out? Because, the spot he's going to take is Cowser, right? He's going to go in left field, and Cowser's going to sit the bench and be more of a backup for a little bit, whether that's to cool his jets or whatever. But then you've got Kjerstad in left, Santander in right, because you want O'Hearn to DH and Mountcastle at first. Okay, Santander in right and Kjerstad in left. That's leaving a lot of area for Cedric Mullins to cover. Not to say he can't do it, but it's asking him to do a lot. Now, Kjerstad, I think people talk about Kjerstad as if he's like this, as if he's a Santander parallel in terms of defending ability. I don't see that. I think he doesn't take the best routes all the time, but his speed to me doesn't seem problematic. Now, Santander has a good arm. I think Kjerstad has a good arm. I think it's just a matter of playing time and learning those routes and what the ball looks like up in the air with the big stadium lights and the crowd, the different crowd and the height of the, and all that stuff. I think it's just game time that he hasn't had a chance to get. So it'd be interesting to see what they do there. Because there's just some cognitive dissonance going on if the plan is to literally bring him up and sit him on the bench again, just like we did a month ago. I get that he gives you an option off the bench that Maton doesn't offensively, and you're trying to win every game and all this stuff, but is it beneficial to bring a guy up for a week and get 4 at bats if that's how you're going to use him? Because that's, if you're going to sit him on the bench, he's going to get a handful of at bats versus, all right, we're committed to bringing him up for a month. He's going to get a run in the team. We're going to see what he can do. And we're going to let Cowser still play a bunch by, letting Mullins sit a day, let Santander sit a day. Cowser's going to come in late for Kjerstad every time he plays because we love the glove. He's going to pinch run or whatever. Maybe that's how they're going to make that happen. But just a very curious one, but one I'm interested to see play out because I think the Orioles owe it to themselves. They owe it to Kjerstad to like see what he can do. And if he comes up and they do give him a run in the team and he crushes the ball, well, you're not going to trade him at that point, which is fine. I think that's exciting. You're not going to trade him. He's going to be in the lineup and he's also going to be your right fielder next year. That feels pretty good. And if they don't play him a bunch, then to me that signals we literally just have you up here because we like your bat better than Maton's bat, and now we're not worried about Jordan Westberg's hurt injury anymore. And we just, we want you up here as insurance, but when things stabilize a little bit, maybe we bring Kyle Stowers back up. You can go back down and get some regular playing time. And then to me, that signals, all right, they're positioning this guy a little bit more as like a trade chip. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch what happens. I'm out on the business of guessing what Mike Elias is going to do. He is far smarter than me and knowledgeable and forward thinking when it comes to constructing a baseball roster, as he's been employed to do. So I leave all of that up to him. But it's fun to speculate, and I'm excited to see Heston Kjerstad play one way or the other. But I do think that depending on how they use him might inform what we expect them to do with him a month from now when the trade deadline comes up. But anyway, that's about all I'm going to cover today. The Orioles have a big series this week with the Cleveland Guardians. As we've talked about on this podcast, I've kind of gotten away a little bit from analyzing every single game because I think that is like agonizing and not super useful. So instead, I'm trying to do these more general topics. And this was a fun one, an interesting one. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you do, give us a like on YouTube. Like I said, the Warehouse Podcast over there. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever it may be, give us a subscription there if you haven't already. And if you have, give us a rating of 5 stars. That'd be huge. Gets us into the ears of more Orioles fans, which is what we're all about. So check us out that way and support us that way. You can also email the show at thewarehousepod@gmail.com. And you can also follow the show on Twitter or X and Threads at thewarehousepod. But I think that's all I've got for now. We will be back after the Cleveland Guardians series. I'm not sure which one of us is going to do that episode, but I'm sure we'll talk about how the team is faring at that point, because after a big series win in New York, then the fall of getting swept in Houston, another big series against the Cleveland Guardians with all these games at once, no off days. I think we're going to get a pretty good feel for where this team is here in another couple days or so. But that is all I've got. I thank you guys so much for listening. My name is Tyler, and this has been the Warehouse Podcast. Hope you have a great day.